Okay, sorry this is late, but this is really the first chance I'm getting to do this. Why won't my PowerPoint work? Click. Right, there we go. First of all, the relevant pages in the booklet are pages 12 to 14. So we're looking at primary economic activities. Actually, we are not going to be doing fishing. We're just going to be doing farming. So I'm going to fly through this, and then unfortunately we're going to have to do the boring task of going through the booklet and having a quick read through that, so will you make sure that you have that handy, please. Okay, farming in the Paris Basin. Pretty much the opposite to farming in the Mezzogiorno. Highly productive. The Paris Basin is one of the most important agricultural producers in all of the EU. It exports a huge amount of food to other European countries, particularly wheat. Agriculture is an important economic activity, probably employs about 4% of the population. And this is because of the physical factors that we looked at yesterday. So climate, soils, relief and drainage. All of these are for the most part positive. They all help the development of farming, whereas if you think back to the Mezzogiorno, for the most part these were negative and they hindered the development of agriculture. Also human factors. Population of Paris and the surrounding region is 22 million, so massive urban market on their doorstep. Infrastructure is extremely well developed, so they're easily able to access markets all over Europe, including the lucrative markets of Germany, Spain, etc. So the polar opposite to the Mezzogiorno. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the different types of agriculture. So I should have back here mentioned that agriculture is specialised, and what that means is that each region is associated with one type of farming. And what I'm going to do is go through each of those regions and explain what type of farming they're associated and why, based on the physical and human factors. So Ile-de-France. First of all, they've got low-lying flatlands. So do you remember Ile-de-France is the central part of the Paris Basin? It's the flattest area because it's the least folded. So here we have very, very big farm sizes. Arable farming is favoured because of the limon or Loess soils, which are those very fertile soils deposited after the glaciation. Also, there is it's probably primarily cool temperate oceanic climate, but it's slightly warmer because it's moving further south. So they've got moderate rainfall, approximately 7 to 800 millimeters year round, which is just enough for crops without a need for irrigation. But they also have warmer summers, which basically means that cereals will ripen. So wheat, etc., will ripen really quickly and can be harvested, and they can have very high yields of wheat fields. So that's what you have around Ile-de-France, these very large wheat fields covering the low-lying flat plains, and this is as a result of a combination of relief and climate primarily, but also urban market nearby of Paris. So if you think about Paris, all of the boulangeries, the bakeries, so all of that wheat is sent in to be made into bread, and those breads, croissants, baguettes, etc. Although it does remind me of a time when I was living in France and I used to be obsessed with the local boulangerie, so I'd go in every day and get a mini quiche, because like basically quiche combines my favourite things, cheese and wheat, so nice crust in it. And I remember biting into the middle of it and there was a used plaster on the inside of it. I've never been able to eat quiche since. It just basically ruined it for me. But here I am, I survived. Okay, so that is the first specialised area, is Ile-de-France, arable farming, primarily the growth of wheat. Next areas then, if we look at Brie and Wet Champagne, so we're looking at a different soil type here, and that soil type is influencing what's grown there. Well, not what's grown there, well, grass is grown there, I guess, because of clay soils. There's more moisture retained in the soil, very good grass growth, therefore pasture lands. And again, flat, low-lying land, which the cows like. So plenty of pastoral farming here. And in Brie, slightly damper climate and clay soils make for good pasture. Oh, hang on, who's this coming? Sorry about that. Interrupted because apparently I promised everybody hot chocolate. Oh God. Okay. Sorry, I actually have to go my hot chocolate that time. So back to Brie. So Brie, because of a combination of climate and soils, good pasture land, dairy farming is predominant here, and this area is well known for its cheese and butter, and also milk. So it would supply the urban market of Paris with milk, extremely high yields, and also the wet Champagne area, because of the clay soils there, it's also used for pastoral farming. Right, who's next? Okay, I have to move this little thing out of the way. Go up there. So dry Champagne then. So here we have chalk soils, and those chalk soils are infertile, but they are very well draining, and also because here the slopes are south facing, they get a huge amount of sunshine, so it's ideal for growing grapes. Now this is called viticulture, Viticulture, and viticulture means the growth of grapes that are specifically used for making wine, and in this case here it is making champagne, they're not using the land for grape growing, it's used for sheep grazing because it's an upland area. So in dry Champagne we have the combination of chalk soils, combined with the relief, because remember it's you've got the falaise d'Île-de-France there, so you've got one of those escarpments, which means that the sloping land, good for drainage, and south facing slopes. Next one there is Solange, and this is the infertile soils, so that is an area of forestry. So predominantly that's the influence of soils on the different types of farming. So these are the different agricultural areas for arable farming. And these are known as the Pays, P-A-Y-S, okay? And the Pays basically refers to different areas where there's specialised types of farming, and I've talked about a couple of them already. Let's take a look at Artois. So if you've heard of the beer Stella Artois, that's probably the easiest way to remember this, because beer is made from barley. So Artois is also a low-lying area covered in loess soils, predominantly barley that's used as a raw material for beer making. Picardy then, again, same situation, specialises in cereals such as barley and wheat. Combination of soil, relief and climate allow this to happen. Ile-de-France, I've spoken about that already, arable farming, mainly wheat production. And then Beauce, which is some of the largest farms, so down here, some of the largest farms in all of Europe, over 400 hectares in size. If you think about the western region where farms are less than 30 hectares, these are absolutely massive. Wheat is the main crop grown here, but they also grow maize, sunflowers and sugar beet as rotation crops. And this is sugar beet there. Very mechanised, so even though the farms are so big, they don't or as big as 400 hectares, they don't have to employ an awful lot of people, because a lot of it is controlled by computers, and they have to use small planes to fly over the area to spread fungicides and pesticides, because that's how big it is. Beauce is known as the granary of Europe. Well, in fact, Paris Basin itself is referred to as the granary of Europe. And a granary is basically somewhere that grain is stored. So because so many grains like wheat and other cereal crop are grown here, Paris Basin has become known as the granary of Europe. So they are the agricultural areas, and these are the dairy areas. So Brie and Normandy and West Champagne. So I've spoken about Brie already. Brie has the clay soils. It's got about 800 millimeters of rainfall per year, so good grass growth, providing milk to the markets, and also producing butter and cheese. And Normandy in the northwest is also a very important region. And here, clay soils and cool temperate oceanic climate, so slightly higher rainfall because of frontal depressions, give perfect conditions for dairy farming. Again, slightly damper because it's close to the Atlantic. And Danone is one of the main companies located here, so I think you're probably familiar with these. These are basically food processors that make dairy products, some milk-based products, and they'd be probably well known for their yogurts. Also, there's a limestone bedrock here, so a lot of calcium in the soils. Right, so they are the PAE, the specialised agricultural areas, both arable and pastoral. And then finally there's viticulture. So viticulture is the growth of grapes for the specific use for wine production, and in this region here, these particular grapes are used for champagne, and this is the only region in the world that champagne comes from. So you've got like Tattingers are based here in some of the famous French champagne companies. And then finally forestry on the infertile soils down there. So they're all the physical factors of climate relief soils. Haven't really mentioned drainage much, but just the fact that there are rivers means there's alluvial soils, which adds to the fertility. Human factors, markets of 22 million people, excellent infrastructure. We'll be talking about transport a bit later on, but there's a radial kind of pattern coming out of Paris motorways that will take you to any other part of Europe. Very fast rail links and a lot of airports, but in terms of transporting agricultural produce, it's the road and the motorway system that will be most important. As a result of all of this is an extremely well developed food processing industry, so this means that farmers have a ready-made market for their goods because there are companies and factories who are buying all of their wheat, buying all of their milk, and then processing them. So the farmers are earning a good living out of this here. Which brings us to exam questions. Okay, so I've just put these up. This one here is ordinary level, this one here is higher level. You've seen both of these questions before when we did the Mezzogiorno, and just to remind you of the different types of factors that might come up in terms of farming. So the main difference is at ordinary level you get to talk about soils. At higher level you don't, which is a disadvantage because really with the Paris Basin the soils tend to be the main thing that drives us. Like at this point it's probably important to mention that now that you will have two European regions studied, you need to make decisions on the day. So if you get a question on agriculture, are you going to choose the Mezzogiorno or are you going to choose the Paris Basin? Which doesn't mean you don't get to do the essay because you're still doing the essay. So higher level, I just want you to concentrate on these for the moment: relief, markets and climate. So this is what I want you guys to do for Monday. Examine the factors that have influenced the development of agriculture in the Paris Basin. And I want you to try and get 7 SRPs on each of the following. Now I'm going to go back through the booklet and talk to you about that in a minute. It's kind of difficult, but we'll see how we get on. Ordinary level then, this is the question that I want you to do. This is on page, let's see, 17 of your booklets. Again, fairly straightforward. Now, name 2 examples of agricultural activity practiced in this region. For that you should be specific. So one example could be arable farming, for example the growth of wheat. Example 2, pastoral farming, for example dairy, keeping of dairy cows. Alright, so name the type of farming and give an example of it. Then discuss how many 2 of the following factor influence the development of agriculture in this region. Relief in soils is probably the easiest one, and well, as we go through the booklet you'll figure out yourself, do you want to do climate or markets, but definitely do relief and soils, and that's secondary. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, if you get the booklets and go to page 12, and we're going to go through those factors to help with the essay. Okay, so you need this because I'm just going to read through it, and it's going to be fast, and have a pen handy as well because I might get you to add some extra stuff. So the Paris Basin is one of the most productive agricultural regions in Europe. This is as a result of the importance of physical factors. Agriculture, very important economic activity. It employs 4% of the population, and France is the biggest agricultural producer in the EU. Agriculture in the Paris Basin is specialised. Specialised means that an area is associated with one type of farming, and they're the pays that we talked about earlier. So climate. So there's cool temperate oceanic, there's transitional in the middle, and there's continental. But because there's many different climate types, it favours both arable and pastoral equally. So adequate rainfall in spring and early summer help the growth of cereal crops such as wheat and barley. Warm summer temperatures, 18 to 24 degrees, and long hours of sunshine are ideal for ripening crops. There's a very long growing season from spring until autumn, so they've 8 months. And that tends to be more with the continental climate, those warmer summer temperatures. So if you want to mark that, warm summer temperatures, that's continental. Next paragraph, cool temperate oceanic climate of the west favours pastoral farming. Mild winters means that there's a long growing season for grass, and rainfall of 700mm spread evenly throughout the year encourages grass growth. As a result, dairy farming is an important activity, as is the production of cheese, so for example brie. Also, the western and coastal areas have an early spring because of the influence of the sea. So again, what we're talking about here is cool temperate oceanic climate. But because they're close to the Atlantic and the influence of the Gulf Stream, this allows for early planting and germination of cereal crops such as wheat, barley, oats and maize. Summer temps of over 20 degrees, perfect for crop ripening, and sunny weather in late July, August allows for harvesting of crops. Soils. So this will mostly be for ordinary level. Limon or West soils, fertile stoneless soil found in Ile-de-France, suitable for wheat and sugar beet. Market gardening carried out here with fruit, vegetables and flowers being important crops sold to the nearby market of Paris. So remember we talked about market gardening in North County Dublin. So market gardening is basically the growth of salad crops, fruits and vegetables for sale at a nearby urban market. Clay is in wet Champagne and Brie. Good for dairy farming because they allow for the growth of grass. Clay soil is also found in northwest in Normandy. Combined with damper climate, farmers concentrate on dairy products. Danone is one of the major companies located here. Also bloodstock industry because the soil is rich in calcium. Bloodstock industry is racehorses. Alluvial soils along the banks of the Seine Loire tributaries support a wide range of crops including vines and vegetables. Chalk soils, dry Champagne, suitable for vines and sheep rearing. Viticulture is the practice of growing vines. 200 million bottles of champagne are produced annually. Some irrigation is needed in the summer. In areas where it's not suitable to plant vines, sheep farming is carried out. And infertile in Solange, we don't care about that. Right, influence of relief. Paris Basin is in a syncline, so most of the region consists of gently sloping low-lying land, and you can use the word undulating to describe that. Elevation rarely rises above 200 metres above sea level. This favours intensive mechanised farming and allows for the development of large farms of over 400 hectares. So it's more than 8, is that right, times the size of the EU average. Very little soil erosion because there's no runoff and there's a lack of rainfall. There's also steep areas of steep slopes along the scarps. These are well-drained south-facing slopes, ideal for viticulture. The grapes in these areas are used to make champagne. The scarp here is known as the Falaise d'Ile-de-France. Now, can you just make a note there? In order to get more SRPs here, you need to give examples from page 13. So just write in give examples from page 13, and then when we read through that, I'll tell you what you're going to be doing there. Drainage, well-drained alluvial soils. Okay, human factors. Markets. One of the most important roles of agriculture in the Paris Basin is to provide produce for the urban market of Paris. 22 million people live in the Paris Basin. 12 million of these are in Paris and its suburbs. This urban population means that there's a high demand for milk, bread and vegetables, and as a result, market gardening is developed on the outskirts of the city to cater for this demand. Perishable and delicate vegetables are grown in glasshouses, including lettuce, tomatoes and cucumbers. Transport systems are well developed, so farmers have easy access to a rich market, reducing transportation costs. Radial network. Basically, the radial network means that all of the roads radiate out from Paris. I think we've talked about that before. Means that farm produce can get to the urban centre quickly. Furthermore, agricultural produce provides the raw material for many food processing industries. So cheese making, so the raw material there would be milk; wine, the raw material are grapes; bakeries, the raw material is wheat; and sugar refining, the raw material is sugar beet. Paris Basin is also centrally located within the northwest of Europe. This area has a population of 120 million. This market is easy to access because of excellent rail and road networks, and therefore centrality is an important factor favouring farmers. Champagne, the most famous agricultural export, enjoys a global market, and therefore this would need access to airports, of which there's plenty in Paris. Right, over to page 13. You still need 14, you need your pens handy. So here what we're going to do is, these are the 6 different areas of specialised farming in the Paris Basin, and we're going to try get extra SRPs by reading through these. So up the top there, a number of distinctive agricultural areas have developed in the Paris Basin, mainly due to the dominant soil types. These farming areas are called pays. So the first one is Ile-de-France. Arable farming is dominant here. Wheat fields cover the flat, low-lying plains. Fertile West soil, moderate rainfall, and warm summers are ideal for cereal growth. This is the most productive arable area in France. So what you could do is use that as an example of where relief has led to farming. So that could be an extra SRP in relief. Both this limestone upland is covered in low-S soils. Farm sizes here are some of the largest in Western Europe, greater than 400 hectares. So again, that can be an example of how relief has influenced farming, because it allows for very, very high or big farm sizes. So you could add that to relief. Beauce is one of the great granaries of the EU. Wheat is the main crop grown. Maize, sunflowers and sugar beet are also grown as rotation crops. It has the highest yields of cereal crops in the EU. Farming methods are highly mechanised. Agricultural contractors use light aircraft to dust the crops with fungicides and pesticides. Mechanisation, you could also link that with relief, but you might need to develop that point a little bit more to get an SRP in it. Picardy and Artois, they are low-lying, low-S covered, specialised in cereals such as barley and wheat. There's not much extra there because you're just repeating yourself. For Brie, damper climate and clay soils make for good pastures, and dairy farming is dominant. The area is famous for its cheese and butter, provides fresh milk to the nearby market, and dairy herds are scientifically managed and have very high yields. So if you can use that one, Brie, as an extra SRP under the influence of climate. So if you go back to page 12, and at the end of the second paragraph it says, as a result, dairy farming is an important activity, as is the production of cheese. So it says, if for example Brie, so give a little bit more detail about Brie there again. 5. Champagne is the most famous product of the Paris Basin. The area has clay valleys between chalk escarpments. These are south-facing slopes. The chalk ridges make up the dry Champagne area. This can also get you an extra SRP under relief, but just, I mean, there is already that written on page 13. It references this, so don't repeat yourself. But there's a little bit more detail here. Soils are infertile but well drained because they're located in south-facing slopes, ideal for viticulture. So that, up until there, that could be an extra SRP for relief. The next bit then could be an extra SRP for climate. Higher inland temperatures, because you're now in the continental zone, also encourage viticulture. Okay, so grapes grown are used for making champagne, etc. Not much else there. Normandy can also get you an extra SRP on climate, because it's closer to the Atlantic, and also cool temperate oceanic climate means that there's damper conditions, and this is better for grass growth. And you can give the example of Danone. Now, basically what I'm saying is, on page 13 I've identified for you a number of extra SRPs on relief and climate. If you think about markets then as well, this is here. What I also want you to figure out is, so if you go back to page 13 and markets are there. And the second last paragraph where it says, furthermore, agricultural produce provides the raw material for many food processing industries. At that point, what you need to do is you should go through page 14, which lists the different areas, and find specific examples of what agricultural produce are used for what food processing. So a good example there would be Danone, okay? And that will get you extra SRPs on markets. Now, I'm sorry if this has been a little bit all over the place. At least you can pause me though, Tara, because I know I talk fast, but now you can pause me and take note. Look, if there's any questions, just drop me a line. I'll put instructions on the page and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. So for Monday, I want you doing that essay. I know it's Thursday, but I want you doing that essay on agriculture, but I also want you answering the questions on page 15, and you should really answer those questions first. So the questions on page 15 are for tomorrow, the essay is for Monday.